Well, praise the Lord, saints. This is Elder Adrian Hammond, and I'm doing another session in a series on the Bill of Rights, or essentially the amendments to the Constitution and the Saint of God, and how they relate to the Saint of God. In some cases, it's not quite evident always, but there's always something that you can pull from it. So I'll go through all of the amendments, and we'll kind of go through it. But the understanding is that each person understands what their rights are. Now, as I said before, the articles of the Constitution are mainly for the delineation of powers. That is essentially the powers of the executive branch, the powers of the legislative branch, and the powers of the judicial branch, as well as powers that are then allocated to the states. The amendments, some of that has to deal with dealing with the powers, but the most of them deal with the rights that we have as citizens of the United States, or people that are staying in the United States. So it's good for us to be able to know this, so that if anything happens to us, we should know our rights as well. And a good example is Paul. Paul, of course, was a Pharisee. He learned at the feet of Gamaliel. And he, of course, broke down the law as well as anyone and be able to relate it to what we are in this time of grace. But he also was a Roman. And as a Roman, he was able to actually demand his rights. He wasn't blustered about it. He didn't essentially scream about it, but he demanded that they show him as a Roman citizen what his rights are. And so if you feel that if Paul can do that, and we know he's a Christian among Christians, then certainly we should be able to know what our rights are as well. So right now we're on the Sixth Amendment, and we're going to be dealing with the last phrase of that particular amendment. There was 4, we went over 3, and we're going to be dealing with the last one today. As I always do, I always read the whole amendment first, so you understand where we're coming from, and then we'll be able to concentrate on the one that we are dealing with at this particular time. So, Sixth Amendment says, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witness against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. That last part is very important, since most of us, me included, are not doctors of the law. We can't really go through and practice and see the various codes. In fact, it's funny, my wife is more of a doctor of the law than I am. I just know what I shouldn't do. And I hope that I don't run afoul of the law or its various precepts. But if anyone does somehow get into trouble with the law, you are entitled to have counsel. This is why one of the first phone calls after you're arrested is essentially not to your family, not to your job, but to a counsel. And if they can't find one, if you can't get one because it's so expensive, because they are very expensive, then there's one that shall be appointed to you, public defender. People may say, oh, that's terrible. They usually have the worst people. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Although essentially their job is paid for by the state, and they may not always have the best that you can get in terms of quality and so on, but they do know the law. They do understand the law. So if you can't afford the high-priced ones, which essentially knows how to stretch things for a long time, then that's what you get. But at least it's better than walking to court saying, Your Honor, I represent myself. No, that essentially is no good. That you should not do that. More than likely, you will probably get the maximum, whether it's a fine or a sentence or both. You will get the maximum. So, but you have a right to a counsel, one who represents you in a court of law, so that they understand the charges against you. That's what the counsel should do, whether they're a public defender or not. They should know the charges against you, know essentially the various penalties for those. They should also understand that there are various things that may mitigate that charge against you, whether it's you weren't there at the time, whether it's, well, it wasn't necessarily something that I had meant to do, it was by accident, or whatever the case may be. They should know that amount in order to present an adequate, maybe not a substantial, maybe not a stellar defense, but an adequate defense. And that's really all, that's really what you're entitled to. So again, saint of God, what does that have to do with you? Hopefully you're not running afoul of the law. But remember, Paul was actually quite a good citizen, but he ran afoul of the law, according to those precepts at the time. And so people tried to accuse him of things that he really didn't, he wasn't supposed to, he didn't do. But, and of course he spoke for his own defense before King Agrippa, but essentially that was before they had lawyers and everything else. Anyway, the idea of a saint of God, and understand what your counsel is. Now, I would say this, and in all levity, your counsel is Jesus. However, Jesus is not recognized as a counsel in law. However, that does not mean you can't get his advice. You can't, and again, get your lawyer, get your attorney. But understand, number one, you're not trying to lie. If you did something, you did something. And if it requires some type of penalty or whatever, you have to do it. It's what you did. Now, if there's a dispute, that's another thing. Then people say, well, Jesus is my doctor. He's my lawyer. Yes, he is, but he's not going to lie. Does not lie for you. Okay? So we will make sure that, so we have to make sure that he's not going to spin things for you. In fact, he's going to have you tell the truth. Now, what he could do is, because sometimes you can be belligerent and get on the judge's nerves, and regardless of how he has to be impartial in handling the law, your intransigence, your stubbornness may cause him to impose a longer sentence or a bigger fine than what you normally would. So you can't act crazy. You have to make sure that it's, and see, if you allow Jesus to tell you what you need to do, then more than likely the judge may not dismiss the charges completely, but the sentence would be lighter than what it would normally be. Because you say that, okay, you're not a threat to escape, you're not a threat to anyone else, you're not a threat to harm anyone else, you just have to deal with this particular thing and then deal with it. Now, the Lord can do anything. He can work in a way that essentially changes the judge's mind or gets on the mind of the jurors or whatever happens to me. So there are things that can happen. But just understand and make sure you know this clearly, that when they ask you who is representing you, Jesus is not going to work in a court of law. He'll work for you, but he works behind the scenes. But you get your lawyer, you get your attorney, you get the one who's going to represent you. You're entitled to that. Make sure you get it. And then you have Jesus right there with you. He's with you anyway. So you don't even have to pay Jesus. He's already there. But get the representatives as ascertained by law, please. Do that. Do that. And for those of you that are not in trouble yet, please obey the law and everything that's in it. And if you get a fine, maybe you were speeding, something like that, pay the fine. Don't argue with the police officer. If you weren't speeding, then yeah, you can go to court, but be respectful. Always, saints, be respectful. It'll go a lot further if you are respectful. Because when you're not, that's when bad things happen. God bless you. Love you all. Take care of yourselves. Until next time, in Jesus' name.